So this video is specifically on the genetics topic, which is one of the major topics in biology and also quite a difficult topic. So we're going to clear everything up in this video. So before I start, here is a list of definitions that I want you guys to understand and also memorize, because sometimes these come up as part of the question in the exam. They ask you, what is the definition of a gene? What is the definition of an allele? And so on. So please memorize all of these, and we're going to be using this example throughout this video. So gene, just the DNA that codes for a protein. Allele is different versions of a gene. So if I'm, say, looking at the gene A, the allele for this gene that codes for a protein A can be either big A or small a. The genotype is the genetics of that organism. So for example, every person will have 2 copies of a gene because they have 2 parents. So they would have inherited 1 copy from their father and 1 copy from their mother. So somebody's genotype would be 2 of the same letters, but it could be either big A, small a, or small a, or big A, big A. One of the letters from mom, one of the letters from dad. So this is the genotype. Moving on is the phenotype. The phenotype is the actual characteristic. So if this is a gene that codes for eye color, then it's the eye color that you actually see. So characteristic is the phenotype. Then moving on to dominant and recessive genes. Dominant gene means you just need 1 copy of a gene to see the phenotype. And this is always the big letter. So that means somebody can either have a big A, or a big A, small a, and they will already have the dominant phenotype, whatever that phenotype is. As long as they have 1 big A, of course they could also have 2 big A's, they can see that phenotype. Recessive, on the other hand, means that you must have 2 copies of a gene in order to see that phenotype. So the recessive is always 2 small letters. That's how 2 small letters are represented. Then you have homozygous dominant. Now homo means the same. That just means you have the same big letters. So big A, one from mom, one from dad. Similarly, if it's homozygous recessive, it's just small a. And finally, heterozygous, hetero means different. So hetero means you got 1 big A from one of the parents and small a from the other parent. So there's they're different, right? One is big, one is small, hence the hetero. So these are basic definitions. There's also a few other things. The genetic diagram. So the genetic diagram is important because they ask you to draw this sometimes, and it's basically sometimes called the Punnett square, where you have the mother's genotype, for example, big A, and the father's genotype, for example, small a, and you fill in these squares, which is, I'm going to use a different color here actually so it's more clear. So this would be big A, small a, big A, small a, big A, small a, big A, small a. So the blue color is the genotype of the parents, 1 parent here, 1 parent here. And then the purple color is the genotype of the kids. So that's what a genetic diagram is, a 2x2 table. Whereas a pedigree diagram, that is when you see these things where it's sort of like a family tree. Now remember, the squares are men. The circles are women. And then also, if the squares are black or colored in, that usually represents a condition. So this is a man and a woman. The man has the condition here in this example, and they have, say, 3 kids, right? So 2 daughters and a son. And let's say one of the sons also have the condition. So that's traditionally what a pedigree diagram is. So having talked about this, let's go and look at some examples first. So whenever you read a question, you want to figure out if the disease, in this case sensory neuropathy, is dominant or recessive. Remember, if it's dominant, then that organism's genotype, means the letters, remember, is either big A, or big A, small a. Dominant means only 1 big A is required to see the phenotype, which is the sensory neuropathy disease here. Or is it recessive? Recessive means it's got to be 2 small a's. Means you must get both 2 small a's to see the condition, the disease. So what does the question tell you? It says that sensory neuropathy is caused by a recessive allele N. In other words, all of the doggies here that have sensory neuropathy, which are the black ones, right? they're going to be recessive. Recessive means small a, small a. Well, I'm using the letter A, but the question uses N, so let's stick with the question then, okay? So it's going to be all the black ones you can start to fill in are small n, 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 small n. Does that make sense? Okay? And then, of course, the white ones are the ones that do not have the disease, and therefore they will be either big A, small a, or big A, big A. So let's start with this mommy dog, right? So this mommy dog married a daddy dog that has the condition. And just look at this. This is the most important bit, guys. The child, one of their male puppies, okay, the male puppies got 2 small n's because they have the condition. It didn't get both small n's from the father, right? Because otherwise it would just be a clone of the father. These small n's means one of the n's came from the father, the other n must have come from the mother, and therefore you can conclude the mother must have a small n, right? In fact, that is the small n that the male puppy inherited from the mother. But since the mother is white and therefore is unaffected by the condition, it means that she must have the capital N to protect her from it. So this is how you deduce these things. Now, just to recap some of the definitions we just said just now, the genotype are these letters that I've written out. The actual letters, big N, small n, or small n, small n. That's the genotype. The phenotype is whether or not they have the disease, which is the characteristic, or not. So it's the white and the black colors. This one would be homozygous recessive, because homozygous, same, small letters, recessive. This one will be heterozygous. Heterozygous. So these are just some of the words that we've just discussed. Okay, so let's try some more questions. So this is a question on a chicken, and let's first determine the genotype and then the phenotype. So what does the question tell us? It says here that some chickens have the silky appearance. And most importantly is this line down here, guys. Look, it says the allele for producing silky feather is recessive. Recessive. So silky is one of the phenotypes, silky. And then the other phenotype is normal, right? Normal. So, like I said just now, you first of all figure out which one is big N, small n, or big N, or small n. And since silky is the recessive one, that means it must be 2 small letters. Remember, recessive is 2 small letters, and therefore the genotype of the silky is 2 small f's. And then the genotype of the normal feathers can either be 1 big F, 1 small f, or 2 big F's. So that's what we've determined so far. And here it asks you what is meant by a gene, and from the definition, it is a section of a DNA that codes for a specific protein. In this case, it's the protein that gives rise to the fur appearance. Okay, so we're talking about the big F gene or the small f gene. Okay, and here it asks, give the possible genotypes of a chicken with normal feathers. So remember, genotype is the letters, and if it's normal, it will just be big F, small f, or big F, like this. Okay, so that is the normal one. Okay, so now next page, it says, a scientist investigates the inheritance of feather types in chickens, and the diagram shows this family pedigree. Remember, pedigree is a sort of family tree, right? So the father, the mother, and they had 4 kids. One of the kids has the condition of silky feathers, and then one of their normal male chicken sons married a female chicken that also has a silky appearance. So that's how you interpret pedigree diagrams. But anyway, before we proceed, let's figure this out, okay? Do you remember, guys, we just said that the silky is recessive. Remember that from the previous page? And recessive is always small letters. What letter do you want to use? Let's use, it was F, wasn't it? So F. So it's got to be small f, so small f. So that means, let me just move this over here. We don't need this over here. So recessive is small f, isn't it? So therefore, all of the black ones have small f, small f, small f, small f, and small f, small f. So that's clear. Now we got to figure out the white ones. The white ones, you guys remember, was either big F, or big F, small f. Remember? So let's try to figure out, is number 4 a big F or big F small f? Which one is it? Which one is it? The fact that number 4's mother is only small f tells me that I must get at least one small f. Remember, one copy from each parent. So 4 must have gotten a small f from his mother, and then the other one must have came from his father. So his father has also got to be either big F small f or small f, big F or big F small f, right? So which one is it? Which one is it? Well, if you think about it, the fact that they have one daughter with a small f means one of the f's must have come from the father, right? Because the other one came from the mother. And therefore, the father must have at least one small f. And then the other must be a big F because he doesn't have the condition. He's got normal feathers. So he needs that big F to protect him from any silky feathers. Does that make sense? And therefore, number 4 would have gotten the small f from the mother and then the big F from the father. Big F because he's white, right? He doesn't have the condition. And same for all the others. So that's how you figure out pedigree diagrams. Then it asks, which one is heterozygous? Heterozygous, remember, is the 2 letters are not the same size. Means it's got to be one big, one small. So who are the big and small ones? 1, 4, 5, and 6, right? Because they're all big F, small f. And hence the answer is 4. Okay. So we revised a lot of the keywords, as I mentioned, heterozygous, genotype, phenotype, right? Phenotype is the silky or normal feather. Genotype is the big F small f or a small f. Okay, then it asks for genetic diagram. Remember, that's a Punnett square, so that's like the 2x2 table. So we're basically drawing the genetic diagram for numbers 6 and 7. So these 2 chickens here. These 2 chickens here. So I'm going to draw the father, which is the square, right? So the father's genotype is big F, small f. That's the father's genotype. And you have to write that in the exam because they ask you to write down the genotype of the parents. And then the mother's genotype is small f, that's number 7, right? So small f, like that. This is the mother's genotype. So that's the first mark, guys. The second mark comes from the gametes. Gametes are basically the options that you have to make the kid. What options do I have? I have either big F or small f, isn't it? So the gametes you can write down here are basically either big F or small f. Then I make my table, and then I figure out the genotype of the offspring. So offspring is in blue here. And this basically big F, small f, this one is big F, small f. This is small f, and small f, small f. And then I need to look at the percentage or the probability of the phenotype. In other words, how much percent of the baby chickens will have silky feather. Remember, silky is small f. So this bunch will have silky, and that is 50%. And then, what about this bunch? This bunch will have normal, which is 50%. So this is a what we call 1-to-1 ratio, because 50-50 chance of them getting either normal or silky phenotype. And finally, it says probability of one of the offspring having silky. So the chance of having silky is just 50%. It's just 50%. So that's a genetic diagram with the 4 marks. First mark, the parent's genotype. Second mark, the parent's gametes. Third mark, the actual table. Fourth mark, the percentage or the ratio. Please get all 4 marks. Okay, great. So now we should go through this more quickly. Another question. Here it says alkaptonuria is an inherited condition caused by a presence of a recessive allele. So therefore, you already start to know that recessive means it's got to be two small letters, right? So small a. That is a disease. And it asks you what is a recessive allele. Back to the definition. It means 2 copies of the DNA. 2 copies of the gene is required to see the phenotype. 2 copies of gene required to see the phenotype. Okay, done. Okay, then it says all of this stuff and basically says draw a genetic diagram to show the genotypes of the woman and the man, the gametes they produce, and the possible phenotype. Basically, another genetic diagram. So, a woman and a man do not have alkaptonuria. That means if they do not have it, they must have the capital A to protect them. So they're either big A, small a, or big A, big A. But which one is it? Think about it. Their child does have the condition. And if you have the condition, you must have gotten one small a from mom, one small a from dad. That means both the mom and dad must have a small a, right? And therefore, both parents would have been a big A, small a, and a big A, small a. So in other words, remember the 4 marks. First mark is parents' genotype. Parents' genotype. So that is mom is a big A, small a. Dad is also big A, small a. And then gametes. Gametes, what are your options? Either big A or small a. So that's already 2 marks that you got. The next mark is the actual table. So again, the mother is big A, small a. The father is big A, small a as well. And then the child, which I'll write in blue, is all of the options here. So that's just like this, isn't it? And it says, what are the possibilities? So the 3rd mark is the table. So 1 mark, 2 mark, 3 mark. What's the 4th mark, guys? That is the percentage of the phenotypes, isn't it? So then you look at the phenotypes and you're like, aha, this is 25% is going to have the disease called alkaptonuria. And then the remaining 75% are normal. And if you divide 75 by 25, you see that this is actually a 3 to 1 ratio. That's also quite important. So if you see a 3 to 1 ratio, guys, the parents must have both been heterozygous. Heterozygous means big A and small a, hetero. Okay, so how we answer the question, the answer should be 25, right? Because, oh no, they don't really ask for which percentage. They just want you to draw the diagram with the relevant percentages. So that's already all 4 marks. Okay. Now this is a great question because just now the questions we've done, all the diseases were small a, small a. All the diseases were homozygous recessive. However, this disease called hypertrophic myopathy is a dominant allele. It means that if you just have one copy of the allele, like a big A, you already have the condition. That means anyone with this heart condition is either big A, small a, or what's the other option? It's a dominant condition, only one copy, one big copy. So therefore, it could also be big A, big A. So this is a dominant disease. That means, okay, so let's skip this question. But the second question is, what is a dominant allele? That is when only one copy of the gene is required to see the phenotype. Just getting one big A, you're going to see the hypertrophic myopathy. Of course, if you have 2 big A's, you're also going to see hypertrophic myopathy. So knowing that, let's try to fill in all of the numbers here then. Now, you know that the people that have the black colors, which is the disease, has got to be either this or this, right? Because it's a dominant disease. And therefore, all of the white ones that do not have it are small a, small a. So we can fill in the small a right away. Then can we figure out what are the black ones? Are they big A, or big A, small a? Again, you can figure out just by looking at the kids, right? This kid had small a, small a. One small a come from the mother. The other small a must come from the father. And therefore, the father, number 1, has got to be big A, small a in order to have a son that is small a, small a. Does that make sense? And therefore, all of the other ones are also big A, small a, big A, small a, big A, small a. So that is done. So this is another great question on genetics. So it says, many characteristics of pea plants are genetically controlled, and one of this is the position of the flower. So the flower, which is right here, let's color it pink so it's really pretty. It can either be axial, which is somewhere in the sort of in the middle of the stalk, or it can be terminal, which is at the top. So that's just the position of the flower. So this guys, this is the phenotype, right? Because this is the characteristic that you're seeing. Now we're trying to figure out the genotype, which is what are the genes that control this. Genotype is always a pair of letters, either big A, small a, big A, and so on. Okay, and then it says in a first cross, guys, if you see the word cross, it just means to mate, to reproduce, okay, to mate or to reproduce. So they reproduced them. So they crossed, they mated them. And what they did was they crossed the pea plants with axial flowers. So they crossed these ones with terminal flowers, with these ones. So they put these together. Okay, they mated them. And all of the kids, all of the offspring produced was 1,120. They all had axial. They all had axial. So what does that tell you? Which one is the dominant one? Axial or terminal? Since all the kids are axial, then it's got to be axial is the dominant one, isn't it? So therefore, axial has got to be big A, at least one big A. And who's the other one? Is it big A, small a, or is it big A, big A? Which one is it? Let's keep thinking. But we definitely know that terminal has got to be the recessive now. We know that for sure. Okay. Now it says tell you to draw a genetic diagram. Genetic diagram. So again, we're thinking about first mark is the parent genotype, and then the parent's gametes, and then the table, and then the percentages, right? So let's have a think. This was crossed with either this or this, but all the kids had axial. Axial means they must all have inherited a big A, isn't it, from one of the parents, and a small a, because there's no other choice, from this parent over here. So big A from one and then small a from the other. However, if some of the kids inherited a small a from this parent and another small a from this parent, then what are you going to get? You're going to get small a, and therefore you're going to get terminal plants. But it says all of the offsprings had axial flowers. It means that all of them cannot have inherited two small a's. So how can you avoid getting two small a's? You could not get this. You cannot have this as one of the parents, because then you might have two small a's. You cannot avoid that. So therefore, I know that the parents have got to be this one and this one. Get it? Once I know that, I can draw my lovely table. And once I do that, you can see that the kids are all big A, small a, big A, small a, big A, small a, big small a. So all of the kids, all of them have what phenotype? They are all axial or terminal. They're all axial. And that's exactly what the question says. They're all axial, isn't it? Okay, so that is that. And of course, you will write out the genotype of the parents, which is this one and this one. And then you will write out the gametes of the parents, which is big A and small a. That's the options that are possible. And then the actual table, all of the genotypes of the offspring. So the take-home message here, guys, very importantly, is that if all of the kids were dominant characteristic, which is the axial flowers, that means the parent, one of them must have had both big A's. Because if they even had one little small a, that combined with the other small a is going to give a bunch of terminal flowers. And that's not what's the case here. So you got to work through it. That's why genetics is so interesting. Okay, so another brilliant question. So here it says, we're looking at flies today, fruit flies. So when you have an apple, you leave it around on the picnic table and some flies come over. Those are the flies here. Those are the fruit flies. And what's happening here? It says here that wing length is determined by two alleles. Remember, alleles definition from page 1 was different versions of a gene, the big L and the small l, basically. Okay, and we need to know that short wings are small l, small l. So these are the small l, these are the small l, and then the long wings, those are the big L, And remember, it can either be big L, small l, or big L, big L, or big L, small l, like that. But what's this question asking? This question says here, it says, which of these describe the genotypes of the parent fruit flies? Okay, so here are the offspring that have these characteristics, the male ones that have long and so on, right? How can you look at this diagram, this table, and figure out the genotype of the parents? This is a very good question. If you think about it, this takes a little prepping, but once we do this, you always get it, is the dominant one, which is the big L, dominant, is this one, which is the 38, and this one, which is the 36. So if I add these two numbers together, I should be getting 74. I should be getting 74. And then what about the short wings? The short wings, which is this one, that's a 10, and this one, which is a 15. If I add these together, I should be getting 25. 25. And what does this ratio look like to you guys? Do you guys remember I said earlier on in the video that if you're seeing a 3-to-1 ratio, which is roughly what's happening here, right? Because 74 is pretty much the same as 75, and 75 divided by 25 is 3. So it's a 3-to-1 ratio. If you're seeing this, that means the parents must have been heterozygous parents. Remember that. This must have been heterozygous parents that will produce offspring with this kind of 3-to-1 ratio. That means the parents must both be big L, small l, and big L, small l. I'll prove this to you right now, so look carefully. This is the father, this is the mother. They're both heterozygous. See that? Now let's look at the kids. Let's look at the kids. The kids will be big L, big L, big L, small l, big L, small l, small l, small l. What is the ratio? This is 25%, and then these one here, that is 75%. Do you see that? That is a 3-to-1 ratio, and that only happens when both parents are heterozygous, means one big, one small letter, and therefore the answer, the parent fruit flies are heterozygous, both of them. So recognize this very important ratio. Very important ratio. Great question, right? Okay, so this has got to be the cutest question on an IGCSE paper, these little guinea pigs here. Now, when you read a question again, like I said, you figure out what's the phenotype first. And the phenotype here is either long hair, or it's short hair. Short hair. It's either long hair or short hair. That's the phenotype. And then you think about the genotype. And I'm going to tell you right now that the short hair is the dominant one. The short hair is the dominant one. So that means the short hair is either big A, small a, or big A, big A. And then the long hair is recessive, therefore it's got to be small a, small a. So that I'm telling you this right now. Okay, so allele, by the way, definition from page 1, allele is different versions of a gene. In other words, it is the big A version or the small a version of the A gene. The A gene here being the phenotype of hair appearance. Okay, so the next question is very interesting. So as I've said, I'm going to write this again down here, is that the dominant is short hair. Okay, and then the recessive is long hair. So it says here, some short hair guinea pigs are homozygous, and some short hair are heterozygous. So short hair is dominant. The homozygous one will be big A, because dominant is a big letter. And the heterozygous one has got to be the big A, small a. It makes complete sense, right? And this is the most important thing some people get confused about is how do you know? How do you know which one it is, right? Just now we had some pedigree diagrams where you had to figure out this thing as well. You had to decide, was it big A, or big A, small a? Because both of them will have the dominant phenotype. So they don't look any different, but they have different genotype. Do you get it? So how can you figure out which one it is? It says here, explain how a breeder could use a cross, in other words, a mating, to determine the genotype of a short-haired guinea pig. Short-haired guinea pig. So I want you guys to pay close attention here. This is a short-haired guinea pig. Okay? Now, I don't know if it is a big A or a big A, small a. However, if I'm going to mate it with a long hair guinea pig, like this here. Okay, so I'm going to mate them together. So they're going to be mated. I know for sure, guys, that the long hair one is small a, because it's a recessive gene. Okay, small a. So let's just have a think. Let's say it was this option first, this green option first. Okay, so this with this green option. So if it's a green option, let's draw out the possibilities. That means I am mating big A, which is the blue color here. So big A, with small a. And what are my offspring? Let's have a look. All of the kids are going to be big A, small a, big A, small a, big A. Are all these kids long hair or short hair? they're going to be all short hairs. 100% short. Okay, that's the green option. Now I'm going to try a different option, which is the blue option. I'm going to make the blue option with this one. So what happens then? Let's draw those out as well. So let's see. So now I have for one of them now is big A, small a instead of big A, big A. So big A, small a, and I'm still mating it with this pink small a. And now I'm going to do the genotype of the kids, and this is big A, small a, small a, small a, big A, small a, small a, small a. What ratio is this? How many percentage are short? Short is dominant, so anything with the capital letter. So this is the short hair, and this is the long hair. This is a 50-50%, isn't it? This is a 1-to-1 ratio. This is 50% to 50%. So what I want you guys to appreciate is that if you're trying to figure out if someone that is a dominant one with short hair, are they big A or big A, small a, all you have to do is mate it with a recessive one. And that's what you write in the answer. You're going to mate with a recessive genotype, which is the long hair. And then you look at the kids. If the ratio of the kids is all 100% short hair, then the father, in this case, the blue one, has got to be a big A. But if half the kids actually had long hair, which is the recessive phenotype, then that means the father could not have been big A. It must have been a big A, small a, because some of that small a was passed on with the other small a to make these long hairs, whereas the big A that passed on with the small a would have made these short hairs. So that's how you determine if it's a big A, or it's big A, small a for those with a dominant phenotype, and you're trying to figure out what is their genotype.